Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Inshallah, continuing on our session on Fiqh, Islamic rituals. We shall be continuing from where we stopped yesterday. Today we will be talking briefly about the detested actions in ablution. So in wudu, what it is makruh. To whatever extent, makruh tahriman, makruh tanzihan, isa'a, whatever. So we'll just briefly be talking about that, and we shall also be speaking on the nullifiers of wudu, what invalidates our wudu when we are performing wudu. Of course, I mean, once we are in the state of wudu, we can touch the Quran, we can perform ritual prayer, we can do tawaf of the Kaaba. But when we are not in the state of wudu, we cannot touch the Quran, we cannot perform prayers, nafil, fard, whatever. We cannot perform ritual prayer, and we cannot do tawaf, we cannot do circumambulation of the Kaaba in Umrah, in Hajj, or for any other nafil tawaf either. And we need to know when our wudu has been invalidated, and in order to know that, we need to study, we need to learn those things, and that is what we are here for today, inshallah. So what are the makruh aspects of wudu? In other words, when we are performing wudu, what is it that is makruh? Leaving a sunnah muakkada. So anything which is sunnah muakkada, and an emphatic sunnah, an emphasized sunnah of wudu, if we leave that out, then that is what we call isa'a. It is isa'a. It is between makruh tahrimi and makruh tanzihi, between makruh tahriman, which is close to haram, and makruh tanzihan. So leaving out anything which is sunnah muakkada and emphatic sunnah, such as rinsing the mouth, for example. Also, to miss out a non-emphatic sunnah, to miss out a sunnah ghair muakkada, then that would entail us doing something what is called makruh tanzihan or makruh tanzihi. So makruh tanzihi or makruh tanzihan is something which is the opposite of sunnah ghair muakkada. So missing out a sunnah ghair muakkada means we are doing something which is makruh tanzihan. But we are allowed to miss out sunnah ghair muakkada if we are in a hurry, if we are in a rush. For example, we fear that the imam, he might be in the last rak'ah, in the last unit of prayer, and if I perform the complete wudu, I will miss joining him in prayer, so I will miss the entire congregation. I need to join him before he makes his salam, before he performs the salutation. So in order to join him, I need to hurry. So what can I do? I can miss out the sunnahs. I can miss out all the sunnahs and just do the further aspect of wudu, and then I can join him. So that is permissible. Okay, the next one, which is khilaf al-awla, to miss out something which is mustahab. So anything which is mustahab, for example, wiping the back of the neck, the nape, that is mustahab aspect in wudu. To miss that out, that is what we call khilaf al-awla. It's against the preferred practice. So the preferred practice is to do what is mustahab in wudu, such as wiping the nape of the neck. And if we miss that out without any reason whatsoever, that is khilaf al-awla, against the preferred practice. So that is briefly the makruh aspects of wudu. Okay, so anything which is against the sunnahs, it is makruh. If it's against sunnah muakkada, it is isa'a. If it is against what you call it, a sunnah ghair muakkada, it is makruh tanzihan. And if it's against mustahab aspect of wudu, it is what we call khilaf al-awla, against the preferred practice. So the preferred practice is mustahab. If we miss that out without any reason whatsoever, then what we are doing is khilaf al-awla. Right, now we come to the nawaqidul wudu, the nullifying aspects of wudu, those acts or those things or those causes that invalidate our wudu, that invalidate our ablution. So the wudu is invalidated by the following acts, and we shall be mentioning 7 of them plus a couple at the end afterwards as well. So generally there are 7 in this particular list. The first one is that anything which exits from the 2 excretal passages. So in other words, anything, whether someone visits the toilet or breaks wind, okay, then that will invalidate wudu. So whether someone urinates or defecates, feces, urine, that will invalidate wudu, and also breaking wind as well, that invalidates wudu. Anything that exits from other than the two excretal passages, such as blood and pus, if it flows and exceeds its orifice. For example, if somebody cuts themselves and blood comes out. Now, if the blood does not flow, so sometimes you'll just get a scratch and it goes red, but there's no blood that's coming out. It's just a red mark. That will not invalidate wudu. However, if a drop of blood forms and that drop of blood flows from its place where the cut is, then that would invalidate wudu. And the same goes for pus as well. So, like if you have a blister which is full of the white liquid, which fills it in for healing process, during the healing process, and that blister bursts, then if it flows, the white matter that or the white substance that comes from it, that emits from it, if it flows from its place, then that invalidates wudu as well. Also, if there is a cut and we put our hand on it or put something on it to stem the blood flow in order to stop the blood from flowing, but the blood flows, okay, that will invalidate wudu. And if we know that now that the blood does not flow, but we know, we are certain that if I had not put my finger on it, if I had not applied pressure on it, blood would have flowed, then that also invalidates wudu. Okay, so we cannot sort of cheat this issue, this particular issue, by saying, well, oh, okay, I cut myself, but I put my finger on it and I stopped the blood from flowing. But we need to think, if I had not put my finger on it, if I had not applied pressure, would the blood have flowed? If it did flow, then that means, if it would have flowed, then that means the wudu would have invalidated, so it is invalid. That invalidates wudu. Also, vomiting of food or water when it is a mouthful. In other words, if someone vomits and he knows that if I keep my mouth closed, it will burst out of my mouth, that is a mouthful of vomit. That would invalidate wudu. That would invalidate wudu. So bleeding from the nose, from the ears, from the mouth, or from any part of the body, if it flows, and that also invalidates wudu. So if it in the mouth, sometimes we cannot tell if it's actually bleeding or not, if it's a lot of bleeding or if it's less bleeding. So if we spit out and the blood is more than the saliva, so it's a kind of yellowish color, then that means the blood is more than the saliva. So that invalidates wudu. But if it is not an orangey or a yellowy color, so it's a very, very light color, so that means that our spittle, our saliva overwhelms the blood, so that does not invalidate wudu. So sleeping whilst lying down on one side, okay, or on the back, or leaning on something, that will invalidate wudu. So if you are sleeping, lying down, that will invalidate wudu. Or even if you are leaning on something and sleeping, that will invalidate wudu, but there's a condition. The condition is that if someone is leaning on something, if someone is leaning on something and sleeping, if that item was moved and he would fall, then that sleeping position would invalidate wudu. If he is certain that I am leaning on something, if that item was moved and I would not fall, then that does not invalidate wudu. Meaning that that person, whilst he is sleeping, he is conscious of his state and he will be able to control himself. Which means that if he was to break wind, you see, this is the breaking, the nullifying factor is not the sleeping per se, it's actually breaking wind. It's actually breaking wind what that would invalidate the wudu, not him sleeping. Because if somebody is sleeping in such a state that he would not be aware of his surroundings, and that if he broke wind whilst he was sleeping or she was sleeping and they would not be aware, then that form of sleeping would invalidate wudu, even if they had not broken wind. So if they're leaning on something and that thing was moved and they would wake up, in other words, they were in control of themselves, then we imply it that they would be in control of themselves if they were to break wind as well. So in that case, it would not invalidate wudu unless they had broken wind in that state. But if they are leaning on something and that thing was, if it was moved, they would fall. Not that we are going to move it and to test them whether they are going to fall or not, no. But we think that if that item was moved and they would fall, then that means that they are sleeping in such a state that it actually invalidates wudu. Because sleeping in a way that loosens the joints, that makes you unaware of your state, that if you are to invalidate your wudu and you would not be aware that you broken wind and invalidate your wudu that way, then that state would invalidate wudu. Just the state itself would invalidate wudu. Breaking wind is not a condition for that. The only condition is that this person would not be aware that they have broken wind or not, whether they break wind or not. So that is the main factor there. And number 6 is insanity. So someone becomes insane, mad, lunatic. So someone who is out of their wits. They cannot understand, they cannot do things according to how they should be done, and they cannot understand things as they should be understood. They do not say things as they should be said. So in other words, they are out of control. They don't know what they are doing. Their mind does not control their bodily joints. Cerebral palsy, for example, that would be one state as well. So anything in which a person's mental state is not normal, in a manner that they cannot control their limbs, they cannot understand what is going on around them. The main reason behind this is that if someone was to break wind, they would not know that they have broken wind. If someone was to invalidate their wudu, they would not know that they have invalidated their wudu. That is the main cause behind this. So insanity would invalidate wudu. And likewise, intoxication. If someone is intoxicated in a state that they would not know what is going on around them, they cannot control themselves, they cannot think straight, speak straight, do anything straight. Okay, so that form of intoxication would be a reason for them to have invalidated that wudu. So in that sense, they have actually invalidated their wudu just because they are intoxicated. Now, intoxication can be willful or unwillful. It can be willful or unwillful. Sometimes the intoxication can be through known causes and through unknown causes. And sometimes intoxication can be through your own control, and sometimes it cannot be. Like, for example, someone takes something which intoxicates them, that will invalidate wudu. But someone takes something which they do not know it's going to intoxicate them, that will invalidate wudu as well. Nowadays, there are certain forms of medication, certain forms of medicine that intoxicate people. In other words, they not totally intoxication, but to a certain extent, they affect their physical ability. Such as there are certain medicines where it says that if you take this medicine, you should not be operating machinery. In other words, that form of medication is going to affect their mental capacity. So that form of medication is going to affect their understanding whether they are in state of wudu or not. So in other words, as soon as they are in a state of intoxication, the wudu is considered invalid. Whether they have invalidated their wudu by other means or not makes no difference. There is nothing else conditional about that. As soon as they are intoxicated, that invalidates wudu. Likewise, as soon as somebody is asleep and when they are snoring, that means they are in such heavy sleep that it invalidates their wudu. Okay, just they're becoming intoxicated just because of the reason of them being asleep, that invalidates the wudu itself. Laughing of an adult whilst in prayer that consists of bows and prostrations. When somebody is in a state of bowing or prostration in a prayer that consists of bows and prostrations. So janazah prayer does not have bows and prostrations. Sajdatul sahw has just prostration, no bowing, so that is not included. But if somebody laughs, an adult who laughs in prayer, and whilst in that prayer they are it is a prayer that consists of bowing and of prostration, and that prayer consists of bowing and prostration as well, such as any general ritual prayer, Fajr, Zuhr, Asr, Maghrib, Isha, Nawafil prayers, Salat al-Ishraq, Salat al-Ishraq, Salat al-Duha, Salat al-Awwabin, Salat al-Tarawih, Salat al-Layl, Salat al-Tahajjud, Eid, Salat al-Fitr, Salat al-Eid al-Adha. All forms of ritual prayers which include ruku and sajda. So if an adult was to laugh in them audibly, then that invalidates the prayer, and it also invalidates the wudu as well. And that is out of respect for the prayer. That is out of respect for the prayer. But a child, it wouldn't, because a child is not mukallaf. A child is not legally responsible. Okay, and that ends the invalidating factors of wudu. Now we mentioned one or two other things before we end. Anybody who suffers from an incontinence of urine, in other words, the urine keeps flowing, they cannot stop it. Okay, so they go to the toilet and they find there's wetness before they have reached the toilet, or it's general that they know of this condition. So what do they do? And if there's somebody who has chronic diarrhea, or someone who has chronic breaking of wind, okay, or there's a woman who suffers from istihada. Istihada is not haid and it is not nifas. It is istihada is an illness basically which women experience as continuous bleeding even outside of the menstrual period. So that is considered istihada. It does not follow the same rules and regulations as haid and nifas. It does not have the same rules and regulations that regulate postnatal bleeding and the monthly period. So in this case, those people, what do they do for each time for prayer? They just perform a fresh wudu and they pray with it. During that time and during the next time of prayer, they can perform all forms of nafil prayer. They can recite the Quran, touch the Quran, do tawaf of the Kaaba as well, as long as they do not invalidate the wudu for any other reason, because of any other reason. For example, if someone suffers from incontinence of urine, continuous urine, for example, okay, and they perform wudu once, and if that continuous of urine continues till the next prayer, then they do not have to perform another wudu between those prayer times. They can perform nafil prayers, they can recite the Quran, touch the Quran as well, and perform the circumambulation of the Kaaba. However, if they break wind during that time, then that will invalidate the wudu, because the reason for which they could continue their wudu, that reason is there, but something else has now invalidated wudu. Okay, so and if someone is in ritual purity, in other words, somebody is in the state of wudu and they are unsure whether they have invalidated wudu or not. They're unsure. Do I still have wudu or not? I don't know. It is best to perform wudu. It is best to perform wudu, though it is not essential for them to perform wudu. Because if someone is sure that they performed wudu, but they are not sure they invalidated it, then the certainty overrides the uncertainty. So they are certain that they did wudu for Zuhr, but they are uncertain now at Asr time whether they invalidated wudu in between that or not. It is better to perform wudu if they have the means and they have the time. But it is not essential that they perform wudu again, because the certainty is that they did perform wudu. It's uncertain that they invalidated it. And same goes for the other way around. If someone is certain that they invalidated their wudu, but they are uncertain whether they performed wudu or not, in this case, they should perform wudu. Why? Because they are certain they had invalidated the wudu, but they are uncertain whether they did it. They performed wudu again or not. So the certainty, that is the wudu being invalid, overrides the uncertainty, which is that they think they might have performed wudu. So it is better to perform wudu again, because the suspicion does not overrule the established truth. That is one of the usul of fiqh. So if there's any case which is certain and there's another case which is uncertain, we tend to go towards the case which is certain. So inshallah we will stop there. If there are any questions, you may put them in now. And somebody did ask a question earlier on my phone regarding wudu, that if they sweat, like they're playing a game or something like that, and if the sweat does not invalidate wudu. No, sweating does not invalidate wudu, but when you're playing game, sometimes you're unaware that the loosening of your joints, you might have broken wind or something like that. That might have invalidated wudu. But if you are certain that you are still in the state of wudu, then that's fine. Sweating does not invalidate wudu, but it is better to perform wudu again anyway if you have the means and the time as well. Another question was that if someone is doing miswak, is using a toothstick or toothbrush or something like this, and they suspect that whilst using it they have bleeding in their gums, Does that invalidate wudu? Well, if you are already in the state of wudu and it starts bleeding and there's blood on your toothstick or toothbrush, and it overwhelms the saliva, as I mentioned before, then that will invalidate wudu. So you'll have to do wudu again. But if you are performing your brushing of the teeth at the beginning of wudu, then that's fine, because you are yet to perform wudu. You are yet to perform wudu. Another one question was that. Regarding sleeping, if I sleep whilst in a sitting position for just a few seconds and I wake up and I am still aware, and all through my sleeping I was aware of my surroundings, does that invalidate wudu? Well, if that person was sitting in a position that he's not leaning on anything, in other words, just sitting straight up, he's not leaning on the back like this chair has a back, he's not leaning on the back, or he's not leaning on the sides like this chair has arms, not leaning on the arms, and he's just sitting, not leaning on anything whatsoever, and just went to sleep for a few seconds, woke up, and he was aware of his surroundings all the time, that does not invalidate wudu. That will not invalidate wudu. However, if somebody is feeling sleepy in that sense, then it is best to perform wudu again, because wudu does help to remove drowsiness. So if there are no more questions, I will end there. Inshallah, we shall start from ghusl tomorrow. We shall be doing the study of ghusl tomorrow, inshallah. Same time, 6:15. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us the time and the age and the effort to be here again tomorrow, inshallah. Thank you very much for joining. Those of you who don't, and those of you who view this afterwards, you're free to ask questions if the system allows you, so that we can catch up and we can help each other answer those questions. Those questions certainly do help me, and they will help other viewers, whether they are live or not. They will help everybody, inshallah. So until tomorrow, we also have, like, just a reminder, we have morals and manners classes. They apply to everybody. They apply to me. They apply to yourselves and people of all ages, especially for youngsters. And those classes are at 3:30 p.m. till 4 p.m. inshallah, on a daily basis. Until then, أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين والمسلمات. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.